सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। रामो राजमणिः सदा विजयते रामं रमेशं भजे रामेणाभिहता निशाचरचमू रामाय तस्मै नमः। रामान्नास्ति परायणं परतरं रामस्य दासोऽस्म्यहम्। रामे चित्तलयः सदा भवतु मे भो राम मामुद्धर। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। Hari Om. From 19th verse onwards, we saw the topic of Adhyasa, 19th till 24th. In 25th verse onwards, we are seeing the topic of Ahankara. There are several things which are discussed in Vedanta, in different Upanishads, different Prakarana Granthas. We see there are so many topics that are discussed. But finally, at the end of the day, Vedanta wants to ask us only one question. And that is, what do you think about yourself? Now, sometimes in conversations, we use this statement when we are angry. What do you think about yourself? But Vedanta is asking us with a lot of humility and with a true sense that having studied Vedanta, what is your understanding about yourself? Somebody might say, I have never thought about it. No, I was just living my life. I never thought about who am I? That question did not come. I had so many things I never asked, which is okay. So for that person who has not started inquiring yet, who is just living a life as it is taking, going with the flow, right? So that is one stage. In our Shastra, the word is Pamaraha. One who is living without inquiring. That is one stage of evolution. Second is, somebody might say, I have heard Vedanta, I have reflected on it, some satsang has happened. I cannot be only this body, nor can I be this, At least first we start with body before going to something higher. He says, I have to be, I am this Chaitanya expressing in this body. I am not this body, but I am that consciousness expressing in this body. So now that is one level above. The first one did not even think anything. The second sadhaka now says, I am this consciousness expressing in this body. And I am putting forth effort to understand my nature. That individual is called a mumukshu or a sadhaka. Question is the same. What do you think about yourself? One person said, I did not even think about it. Second one said, I think I am this consciousness expressing in this body. What we otherwise call as jiva. I am this conditioned consciousness. I cannot be only this physical body. Now again, Vedanta says, what is your understanding about this consciousness And what is your understanding about this body? One who has understood that consciousness alone is the absolute reality, and everything starting from mind, body, and everything which is drishya, that is only an appearance. That is an appearance in this substratum, which is consciousness. That is who I am. That person is called Siddha Purusha. First one was called Pamara. We are giving names so that just we can indicate. We don't mean to label anybody here. Pamara is the first one. Second one is Sadhaka or Mumukshu, who thinks that I am this consciousness and this body. I am this consciousness expressing in this body. But the third one is Siddha Purusha, who has understood that consciousness alone is real and everything else is an appearance, starting with this individuality. So these are our stages of maturity in our sadhana, maturity in our understanding of Vedanta. And we should know how to thoroughly settle down in both, the second one and the third category. That is where we had seen the verse, Rajju Sarpavadatmanam Jivam Nyatva Bhayam Vahet. Having considered myself to be a jiva, this finite entity, Bhayam is not going to go away. Bhayam will remain because Bhaya Hetu is there. The cause of fear is still there. And what is that cause of fear? Giving reality to duality. Bhaya Hetu is over there. And as this jiva, having identified with these conditionings, how do I mature myself so that I can transcend on to the third step and own up this knowledge? So that point also we saw, where tuning with samashti, purifying the mind so that it becomes subtler to understand the teachings of Vedanta. That is another step of removing our fears. Right? So that point also we had seen how Sharanagati can remove fear to a very great extent. And Bhagwan's grace only is there where he says, I will give knowledge to this sadhaka now. So that is the third step. What is the knowledge? That I am that infinite consciousness, and this ahankara and the world outside is an appearance in me. There has to be some difference between sadhaka and Siddha Purusha, right? In their knowledge and the knowledge of a sadhaka. Pamara you can leave aside because that person is not even inquired. But sadhaka says, I am consciousness expressing in this body. Means he is giving reality to body, but he says, I am that consciousness expressing in this body. But Siddha Purusha, they have very clear understanding that consciousness alone is. Whatever is appearing is mithya. So that is, the sequential way of inquiry. And this is where we had seen the verse 29. Let us chant that verse. Swabodhe nanya bodhecha bodharupatayatmanaham nadipasya dipecha yatha swatma prakashane. Now the student is asking, if this consciousness, Atman, cannot be known by any other means, then how will I know it? Right? What is the instrument by which I will know it? So then Bhagavan Shankaracharya ji is saying that you don't need any instrument to know Atman. It is ever experienced. All that you need is clear knowledge of this fact. Swabodhe na anya bodhecha. There is no other instrument that is needed or something that I have to do in order to experience Atman. Atman is ever experienced. We just have to know this fact very clearly. And no matter how many times you hear this statement, it takes a lot of time for this thing to sink in, for this particular concept, that I don't have to experience Atman somewhere. I am Atman. I am that consciousness. Just for this fact to understand, it takes a lot of time. This point alone expresses as a question in many sadhakas, that I have studied Vedanta, but I want to experience Brahman now. I feel this is intellectual knowledge. I feel this is only words, but I have to do something now to experience that. What we're actually seeking is experience of a calm mind. Mind has started bothering so much, but I'm mixing up Atman and mind. That itself is called as Adhyasa. So these points we should not miss in our spiritual journey. Otherwise, we'll constantly struggle for liberation and we'll go in the wrong direction. So my definition of liberation will be, when mind is quiet, I'm liberated. When mind is disturbed, I am again bound. So Vedanta wants to say, our nature is of that Chaitanya Swarupa, which is ever liberated. Take care of the mind through devotion and sadhana, and come to own up this higher nature. And in general, whatever things we have known in this world, we always had to gain the experience of that thing. Then only we say, I have seen it or I have known it. For example, right now, if I describe something happening in Uttarkashi, so just by listening to that, you cannot say you have experienced Uttarkashi. Right? You might know the greatness of that place, the Ponji's Kutia is there. Then you will say, oh, I have not gone there. I have to go there and experience that place. So something which is different from me, I have to listen about that thing and then go there and experience that thing. But in the case of Atman, it is not different from me. It is me myself. So the same time at which I come to know it is the same time my search should stop. Even before, when I thought I was ignorant, even at that time, I was experiencing Atman alone. Even this statement is a compromise statement. The correct way to say is, in the light of Atman alone, all experience is possible. It is not another verb of experiencing Atman. Sometimes the English translation makes it very difficult, and I feel it confuses things even more. For example, you must have heard the word called as self-love. Right? Self-love means what? I love so many things outside. Like, I might love a car, I might love a house, I might love pizza. And then now I'm trying to love myself. So now who am I? Am I the object or am I the subject? If I am trying to develop love for myself, so I will become different from that object. What Vedanta wants to say is, you are of the nature of Ananda. Right? Don't search for Ananda outside. Just let go of those things which you have erroneously included. What remains, that itself is Ananda Swarupa. And if you want to experience something, then develop a pure mind. In that mind, you will experience reflected Ananda. Right? So that part also is explained. Both we should be very clear. So self-love is not trying to love Atman. Then Atman will become different from me and I will start looking for it as an object. This is the fundamental difference, in all other knowledge that we gain and about knowledge of Atman. Knowledge about anything else is about an object which is different from me. So one is, I need that knowledge of that thing, then I need my sense organs, I need a thought, right, to go and see that thing. But in case of consciousness, it is ever experienced. Thought is only needed to remove things which are erroneously included in Atman. That is why that verse what we saw, Krutva jnanam swayam nashet jalam katakarenuvat. Very precise verse. I think the fourth verse, right? Fifth one, Atmabodha only. How does this knowledge take place? This Brahmakara Vritti, it comes and it just negates things which we have erroneously included, and that Vritti also gets negated. In that way, knowledge will take place. Swabodhe na anya bodhecha bodha rupataya atmana. This is the difference between any object of the world. That object is not self-shining, it doesn't have its own existence. But Atman is of the nature of existence, it is of the nature of Chaitanya. Let's think about it this way. To know whether I exist, I don't need anything else. I don't need light, I don't need sound or anything to say whether I exist or not. And I cannot reverse that understanding also. Even if I try very hard, I will never be able to say, I do not exist. Because I am that Sat Swarupa, I am that existence. My nature is of existence. Chit also is the same thing. In Jagrat Avastha, we are taking just for analysis. Try to say this fact that I don't know, or my ability to know is gone. I might not know details about something. There might be ignorance about an object, but even that ignorance I am aware of. So my ability to know also doesn't go away at any time. So these things, if we reflect upon, first thing what should happen is get clarity about nature of Atman, that I am of the nature of existence and consciousness. And secondly, know that it is not another object, it is me myself. So to know this Chaitanya, I don't need another Chaitanya. So na deepasya anya deepecha yatha swatma prakashane. So to know a lamp, to see a lamp, you don't need another lamp because it already has its own light. Another example that is given is if you look at the moon at night. So if you want to see any object in the dark, then moonlight is very helpful. But actually, even the word moonlight is an erroneous statement because it's only reflected light of the sun. So let us say now in the morning time, sunrise happens. To see the sun, I don't need moonlight. Because moonlight itself is borrowed from the sun. And again, to illumine sun, I don't need this moonlight. So moonlight, you can take it as Chidabhasa. To illumine the world outside, you need this Chidabhasa. But to illumine Atman, from whom Chidabhasa is deriving existence, and it is deriving its ability to illumine. To know Atman, I do not need this Chidabhasa. The reflected consciousness, that is not needed to illumine my own nature. In other words, if you ask, why is this antakarana needed then? Right? If you say mind is not needed to illumine consciousness, Chidabhasa means what? Mind and ahankara. You take it in that way. So why do I need this? Who is the one who is benefiting from this mind and ahankara? Why do I even need them? So I need it to conduct this inquiry. Right? I need this mind, I need this ahankara, a sattvic ahankara, so that I can conduct this inquiry and understand my own true nature. That is the whole purpose, because whichever thought comes, that thought will come in mind only. Mind itself is thought. So I might have thoughts of objects, but Brahmakara Vritti is also another thought, and it will come in mind only. And this ahankara, if it is sattvic ahankara, it will be able to understand that vritti thoroughly. It will be able to understand the knowledge very clearly. That is the whole purpose of ahankara and mind. This question keeps coming in several Vedantic discussions, that if you say mind cannot illumine Atma, then what is the need of mind? So need of mind is for this vritti to come. That vritti will come in the mind alone, and purer the mind, clearer will be the knowledge. So what does Vedanta do? It reveals that thing which is already attained. Right? My Swarupa as Sat, Chit and Ananda is not something Vedanta will create. Knowledge cannot create anything. If I tell you the color of this dress is yellow, I have not created that yellow color. So knowledge will only reveal nature of a thing as it is. In Sanskritam, if you just want to write that word, it's called as praptasya prapti. Whatever is attained, that knowledge about that thing is given. You don't have to attain it new, or you have not attained it after that knowledge took place. It was already there. Praptasya prapti. Our nature as Satchidananda Brahma is already attained. What is the example? Is Swakanta Bharana, like that necklace which has gone behind, or I feel that I have lost it. But if somebody points it out to me, they have not produced that necklace or given it to me. It was already there. That statement just created clear knowledge. So, what is the Pratijna Vakya? What is the promissory statement of Vedanta? Paramananda Prapti. Right? That absolute joy you will get. But how will I get it? By knowing I am already that. Ananda Prapti is not by doing something, it is by knowing. And what is another thing Vedanta does? Nivrittasya nivritti. It removes that which is already removed. Means it was never there in me to begin with. What is that thing? Dukkham. Anandam is praptasya prapti, and dukkham is nivrittasya nivritti. That is another promise of Vedanta, right? Atyantika dukkha nivritti will happen. In what way it will happen? So it will happen in this way. By knowing that dukkham is an upadhi, and I am that consciousness that is untouched by this upadhi. So nivrittasya nivritti. Knowledge cannot remove anything also, like physically remove anything. It can remove only if it was not there to begin with. For example, that rope and the snake. Now that snake is appearing in that rope. if I say that I have driven away that snake, right? I did something and I drove away that snake. So that is an erroneous statement, because that thing which was not even there, how can you drive it away? All that you can do is know the substratum clearly and understand that this snake was never appearing there. So know the substratum of this dukkham, which is none other than Sakshi. And in that Chaitanya, in that Sakshi, understand that there was no dukkham to begin with. All of them came because of my identification with this body, with this mind, and the world outside. So that is Vedantic inquiry. So how does Vedanta do dukkha nivritti? By telling me that this dukkham was not there in me to begin with. In that Chaitanya, there is no trace of prapancha, what to talk about dukkham and raga dvesha. This point comes somewhere, I think in some bhashya, or somewhere it comes. Bhagavan says, Atma is prapanchopashamam. In this consciousness, there is no trace of prapancha. What to talk about? Raga, dvesha, dukkham, and other things. Right? So these are all meditation pointers, and these are Siddhanta verses. We should not mix up with sadhana. We should not mix up with other things. Sadhana verses are on their own, and there we should not mix up Siddhanta. Meaning what? See, right now, if I want purity of mind, is it praptasya prapti or is it apraptasya prapti? I mean, do I already have it or do I want to gain it? He said, no, I don't have it right now. I have to gain it. So I will have to put some effort, take up some anushtanam, do sadhana, karma yoga. All those things are to be done. Knowing it is not sufficient. I cannot say I know every method to purify my mind, and knowing that itself will give purity of mind. Yes, no, I will have to do that anushtanam. I will have to do japa, develop that kind of connection with Bhagavan. So that is another discussion. But when we talk about Siddhanta, there we should be very clear of what is the definition of moksha in Vedanta. Right? So it is praptasya prapti and nivrittasya nivritti. So now with this discussion, the topic of ahankara is completed. Okay, so from 25th verse until 29th verse, Bhagavan Shankaracharya ji described about ahankara. 30th verse onwards is going to talk about Vedantic meditation and the method of inquiry. Okay, so it's a new topic that is going to start. And I thought since we have a break now for a few weeks, we can just quickly recap, whatever we have studied until now, rather than entering into a new topic. So when we meet back again, then we will start 30th verse onwards. And as I mentioned earlier, every verse of Atma Bodha stands independently. Means we should not be in any hurry to complete the text or just, finish several verses. Because point is not that. Any verse that we have studied, there can be an elaborate text that can be written on each verse of Atma Bodha. That much of depth is there, that much of richness is there to the ideas which are presented here. And they're not like a sequential connection or anything. So whichever verses we study, we'll take our time and try to understand the deeper aspect of it. So where did we start? Now I'm recapping until first verse until 29th verse. So we started with Mangalacharanam. right? The first verse, tapo bhikshina papanam shantanam vitaraginam. And we have been seeing so much of elaboration about tapasya in Ramayana class. You know, how Parvati ji is telling the Sapta Rishis, or how she demonstrates how one should do tapasya. So the first verse was Mangala Charanam, which spoke about how can I benefit the most from Atma Bodha or any Vedantic study, any Vedantic text. What are the things that I need to adjust in myself so that I can come to appreciate this teaching more and more. Then verse number 2 to 5 spoke about what is the means of liberation. As we define bondage, in the same way will be our means of liberation. If I have understood bondage to be some situation outside, then means to liberation will not be jnana. It will be some type of karma by which I can fix that situation. If I have understood bondage to be something else, right, either karma or my desire, according to that, there will be different solutions. But the fundamental cause of bondage is misunderstanding myself to be this limited individual. If that becomes my understanding, then my means to liberation will be knowledge alone. So we saw all different aspects, how different solutions are important. Vedanta does not dismiss any of them or put them down. All that Vedanta is saying is, let us understand the levels at which bondage is operating. Right? Once we have understood those levels, we should know how to deal with it at every level. And these paths are not parallel paths. Means you cannot say Karma Yoga also, Bhakti Yoga also, and Jnana Yoga also. They are not three different paths. All paths will lead towards Jnana. Okay, this discussion also we had. Because no other path will remove Jivatva. I am this finite individual, that will be taken away. That notion, erroneous notion, will be taken away only through knowledge. So it's not a fanatic statement that our acharyas make over here. It's more to point us in the right direction. All paths are important, but we should know how they relate to each other. 6th verse to 11th verse was about nature of samsara. Samsara, we might have our own definition. But Bhagavan Shankaracharya said, Raga Dvesha is the first samsara. Kartrutva Bhoktrutva is samsara. And in the colloquial sense or wider sense, is this entire creation, whatever we see around, that also is samsara. But that samsara lasts only until we have not inquired into the substratum. Once we inquire into the substratum, we realize it is this consciousness alone which is appearing as all these things. Just like once you know that gold, then any ornament you see, you realize it is nothing but that gold. This itself is called as realization. Knowing that one consciousness alone is appearing as many, giving reality to both is the stage of sadhana. That consciousness is also there, Nama Rupa is also there, and both of them are real. That is sadhana. Siddha Purusha knows that consciousness alone is real, Nama Rupa is mithya. That is the inquiry into nature of samsara. Okay, 6th through the 11th verse. And different examples Bhagavan gave. This verse is full with examples, He says samsara is like bubbles in consciousness. Budbudaniva varini. Different nama rupas are there, but the substratum is that same consciousness. Then came the topic of upadhi. What is upadhi? Upasamipe sthitva sviyan dharman anyatra adatte iti upadhi. Staying close to something, that thing puts or projects its own attributes on that other thing, but without actually bringing about any change in that thing. Example is a classic one of that crystal and cloth. Cloth stays near it, throws its colors and everything on the crystal, but it does not bring about any change in that crystal. It might look colorful, but nothing has happened to the crystal. So that cloth is called as upadhi. So now what is the example, or what is the main point that we want to highlight here now? All three conditionings which are there, the gross body, subtle body, and causal body, all of them are upadhis. They are only throwing their attributes on me, the consciousness, Chaitanya Swarupa. They are not bringing about any change in me. So this point was elaborated from 12th verse to the 18th verse. Okay, so what are upadhis? That topic was elaborated. And why was this elaboration done? Because right there, where you are seeing these upadhis, so it was done through Shariratraya, right? Three different bodies were pointed out: Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira, and Panchakosha was also described from 12th verse until 18th verse. So why was this described in this way? Because right there where you see Panchakosha, right there where you see Shariratraya, search there only. There alone you will find this consciousness. So that was the reason why upadhis were described. An example was given that right where you find the husk, there alone you will find the rice grain. That husk is covering that rice, so you have to do avaghata. You have to pound that, husk so that you can separate the husk from the rice. But here also the pounding has to be done between Panchakosha and Atma, but it is yuktya avaghatata. Means think in the lines of Upanishads, use logic, and try to establish and own up the teaching of Upanishad. Right? Because only those things what we think and own up, that alone will do dukkha nivritti. So Upanishad statements that I am not this body, I am not this mind, should become reality for us. So that elaboration was done. So 12th until 18th verse. Then from 19th to 24th verse, Bhagavan described what is adhyasa. Adhyasa means taking one thing for the another. So what is happening here? Upadhis which are there, their dharma is taken as my dharma. So my dharma means dharma of Atma. Upadhi dharma is taken as dharma of Atma. That is the superimposition that is happening. So if something happens to body, I think it is happening to me. Something happens to mind, I think it is happening to me. So that is the adhyasa which was described from 19th to 24th verse. And several examples were given that clouds are moving, but somebody who doesn't know this fact, somebody who has not thought clearly, he thinks moon is moving. It might appear that way, but what it needs there is more clear inquiry. Another example was the blueness in the sky. Color belongs to the light or that reflection of light. But I superimpose it on that sky, which is colorless. So in the same way, all dharmas of these conditionings are superimposed on Atma. So that was the topic of Adhyasa. Then from 25th to 29th verse, what we saw today, came the topic of Ahankara. This adhyasa is good to understand, but what is that most expensive adhyasa, that is happening? So that expensive adhyasa is over here. I am that infinite consciousness, and I have taken myself to be this limited ahankara, or this limited finite entity. And this ahankara is something which I experience, which I am familiar with. Vedanta is drawing our attention to that thing. And it's a great joy, after having studied several things in Vedanta, to finally come back to this point. Both parts are important. We should also explore and study systematically, not dismiss that portion also, because depth in Vedanta will come only when we go that route. Right? All aspects we should be very thorough with, but finally where we should come is this ahankara. Where Akhandanand Maharaj went to Ramana Maharshi once. He writes in his book, and such a great Mahatma, right? Akhandanand Maharaj and both Ramana Maharshi, but he went to meet Ramana Maharshi in Tiruvannamalai. And he asked a question: what is the ashraya of avidya? What is the locus of ignorance? And Ramana Maharshi asked him back, who is asking this question? So Maharaj said, I am asking this question. He said, are you asking this by knowing it, by knowing the answer, or are you asking it without knowing the answer? He said, without knowing the answer. He said, then you alone are the locus of ignorance. You might give several names, but finally it has to come to aham only. So it's a very precise way of bringing us back into this understanding. Whichever method we take, right? We should settle down in that method, but this method of bringing it back to aham and then questioning the validity of this questioner. So it's a great way to, abide in this truth. So that was the topic of ahankara, and then finally we saw swabodhe nanyabodhecha, right? To know this Atman, we don't need any other knowledge, any other consciousness. All that we need is clear knowledge of this fact that this ahankara itself is Brahma. How will you understand the statement? Just let go of those things which we have erroneously included in this Brahma. Means wherever I find snake, that snake alone is the rope. Okay. So that was this portion from 25th to 29th verse. So now that we have some time or some break in between for these classes in particular, there is one reflection activity that I would like to leave all of you with. You can go back and think what all concepts we have covered in Atma Bodha so far and which verse covered that concept. Okay, what all concepts we have covered in Atma Bodha so far and which verse covered that concept. So for example, if I say means to liberation is jnanam alone. Now this is a concept, Siddhanta it is called. So which verse covered it? Second verse. Another concept could be, how does knowledge take place? How does Brahmakara Vritti take place? So which verse or verses covered it? Fifth verse, Ajnana Kalusham Jivam, and the verse that we saw today, 29th verse covered it. Okay, so like this, different concepts you can write down and see which verse covered that concept. You don't have to elaborate the concept, just write one line. It gives a lot of precision and you will feel you are getting a hold of the text. And I tell you, all these concepts we will build upon later when we study Upanishads. Right? This is a Prakarana Grantha, means it is training us, building that foundation for studying Upanishads. Okay, so we'll conclude here and take some questions. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. I hope all of you have marked your calendars for Swamiji's Yajna starting this Saturday. And next week we won't be having classes. Atma Bodha class we won't have. This Saturday, Tattva Bodha class we will have. Okay. And all other details will be shared via email. And also hope to see all of you at the Om Run. Okay, so the Om Run season that has been announced. So I hope all of you are benefiting from that also. My phone shuts down. So. When you say you should challenge your ahankara and you should inquire into Atman, who is you here? This is a question. Huh? Who is that you? Take the example where it is easier to understand. You should challenge ahankara and you should inquire into Atman. That you is referring to that snake. That snake should challenge its own validity and that snake should inquire into the rope. Only person who can inquire is that snake. Snake means what? Ahankara. So ahankara has to inquire into its own validity and the same ahankara has to inquire into nature of Atman. Okay, so first I have to make this ahankara sattvic. It should allow me to do this inquiry and then it should also inquire into nature of Atman. Means once you inquire into the substratum, then I will know that I cannot exist without that substratum. I referring to ahankara. But my real nature is that rope alone. Will that snake understand that rope different from itself or the same as itself? If it understands that rope as different from itself, then knowledge is not clear yet. That is how we should inquire into nature of Atman. This is a long question, but I understand, or I think, and I'm very confident it's asked in the right spirit, and Sadhaka wants to get some more perspective. Can you kindly clarify the context when you invoke the grace of Guru when starting a text, like Bhagavan Shankaracharya ji? Specifically, when you invoke the name Shankaracharya ji, the physical, subtle, and the causal bodies referenced by that name are no longer present. To my limited understanding, this appears to be a reference to something which is mithya and not satyam. Why not use the term Brahman when invoking grace? Is it out of love and appreciation for the Guru? If yes, isn't that an unhealthy attachment? Is it out of tradition or something else? Sorry for the long question, but I wanted to provide context. So good, I appreciate you providing the context. That is the only way we can communicate, right? I cannot see video, nor can we have in-person discussion. So it is good that you have provided context. And I think this is a sincere quest, to understand why do we chant Mangalacharanam? Why not directly pray to Brahman? one thing is, in Vedanta, when we study Paramartha, we study Paramartha as it is. But whenever we have to do anything in Vyavahara, we don't mix it up with Paramartha. So this is Vyavahara that is going on, right? We have to study, somebody has to listen, somebody has to speak. So in that, we always have to do it as Jiva only. As this finite being only, you can speak. As this finite being only, you can hear. So in that Vyavahara, making sure that we don't develop our own arrogance. What we had seen in Tattva Bodha, the discussion of Mangalacharanam, Ashraye Abhishta Siddhaye. At Bhagwan, may we invoke Satvik Ahankara, and the only way to do that is by invoking totality. Any other role you take, it will become another bondage. Right? So that is why Sopadika, conditioned form, is invoked. And in Vyavahara, that is the supreme most. So there we should be very clear how we can transcend, this ahankara, or be safe in Vyavahara. Because, Shreyas and Preyas, they always come together. Even while doing Vedantic sadhana, even while doing pravachan or listening, you never know when this ahankara will start rising in a new way. So there we should not try to mix up Paramartha. There we should go with whatever our acharyas have told us. Any kind of arrogance or ahankara might rise again, even with related to Shastra. So that is why Mangalacharanam is to mellow down that ahankara. To say that whatever we have received, none of it we can claim credit over. All we have to do is be grateful for that. And for the tuning to happen, right? That whatever we chant in Sahana Bhavatu and all other Mangalacharanam, that tuning is with mind only. You don't need to tune Atman. Right? Atman is out of tune. It is beyond tuning. You don't need to tune physical body also, it is inert. So what we need to tune is this mind. And that we can tune by invoking Samashti, reducing our own Ragadveshas, at least for that time praying to Bhagwan that may my mind not go here and there. Right? So Brahman will not directly do this for us. Brahman says, I am witness of that disturbed mind. One who will help us is Bhagwan. Right? With conditioning, seek support from the conditioned. Without conditioning, know yourself to be that unconditioned consciousness. Means we should not have one leg in Vyavahara, another leg in Paramartha. Right. So that distinction we should know clearly. Is it an unhealthy attachment? No. It is said, getting attached to the detached, we will become detached. Getting attached to somebody who is detached, we will become detached. Because they will make sure that they will point us in the right direction. So having this attachment, first it will withdraw all other attachments. Somebody who can have that sambandha with Gurudev. Because he is my teacher, you say, I am having that kind of connection with him. Now that attachment will take us away from other attachments. Take us away means what? It will put other things in the right perspective. Because again and again you will hear his teachings, again and again you will read his writings. And what he will say there is, keep distance. Right? Have healthy introvertedness. You are not this body, you are consciousness. So that teaching will come from them. That is the glory of getting attached to. Attachment for becoming devoted to their cause, becoming devoted to their teachings. That is how you should look at attachment word over here. The religious solution to face karma, phala, is total surrender to God. What is a practical Vedantic solution to overcome this fear? My hope is that, as we study Vedanta, these answers should start coming from within through whatever we study. And first of all, not to look at devotion as merely a solution. Solution is something where you are trying to, just trick your mind into something and then you are given a solution because you cannot do anything else. So we should not look at devotion in that way. Devotion is the truth. As this conditioned individual, we cannot circumvent that sadhana. So it's a systematic way of maturing ourselves as sadhakas. So we should not look at it as a religious solution. Although that word is used, I would not encourage looking at it in that way, because then we will never be able to appreciate it. We will never be able to benefit from it. In Kenopanishad, Bhagwan writes pages and pages, Bhagwan Shankaracharya ji, just to establish existence of Bhagwan through logic. Because then he said, this is not our main method of inquiry. Main proof of existence of Bhagwan is Upanishads. Main source of knowing nature of Bhagwan is Upanishad. But he says to strengthen our understanding, to get this conviction, to know Bhagwan's role in our life, I'm giving all this logic. So that is a maturity in our sadhana. So we should not look at it as mere, religious solution. Even if you want to understand Mahavakya, which is Vedantic solution, first we have to know what is Tatpada. And to know Tatpada means to know Bhagavan. So Vedantic solution will not make sense. Even if we intellectually understand, we won't be able to benefit from it unless we have done that in between step. So what is Vedantic solution actually? Vedantic solution is after you walk these steps, Vedanta says, Nivrittasya nivrittihi. Fear is appearing in Upadhi or in Atma. It says fear is in Upadhi. Why? Because I know that whatever I know has to be different from me. Just like thought of joy, I also know thought of fear. So fear is a thought, so it has to be there in Upadhi, it is not there in Atma. This is Vedantic solution. And we should see for all of us that to appreciate that is not easy directly. So it's a very thorough path. It's a very well thought of path. So we should gradually take steps. We should try to mature as seekers, not look at it only as a religious solution. Okay. Can a true bhakta ask Bhagwan for anything? Bhagwan knows what a bhakta wants anyway. To become a true bhakta, it takes time. And until we become that, it is said, ask whatever you want. And let him give whatever is good for us. Right? So in that way we should look. Directly to become Nishkama Bhakta is not easy either. Because I have desires, I have some things that I want to accomplish. So there also we should gradually walk. Okay. So I hope all of you get a chance to reflect on the concepts and also write down which verses are covering those concepts. Okay. Hari Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.